A few years ago, Darren and I went to the Dead Sea in Israel. And you know, I was thinking about my farm when I was in the Dead Sea, Darren.
Sure you were.
I was. And the reason why I was is the Dead Sea is the lowest point on Earth. Water goes into the Dead Sea. The only way it can escape is evaporation. When water evaporates from the Dead Sea, what's it leave behind? Salt. The Dead Sea is 10 times saltier than the ocean even. It's so salty that your feet they just come up when you walk into the water. You're buoyant. I mean, I would float in 10, 12 feet of water. But you know, here's why I was thinking about the farm, because I looked down in the water and I didn't see anything. I mean, I was able to see right to the bottom is what I'm trying to say. There was no fish. I didn't see any algae, no plants. Everything was dead because of all that salt. And that's what made me think about the farm. And I thought, oh man, we've got a bunch of little dead seas on our farm. We call them alkali spots or saline spots, and you can see them all over the Midwest. When you drive around, there are little white areas in fields, and there's almost no growth there. The reason why is too much salt.
I was at a farm this summer where they had one of these alkali spots, and it was literally white on top of the ground, and there's a strip of green right through the middle of that alkali spot where the soybeans actually survived. And I said, wow, look at that. There's one row that survived through that alkali spot. And the guy said, yeah, I put some tile out there. It's at 40-foot spacing. One of those spaces happened to be right through that alkali strip, and the soybeans actually survived there because I was able to move some of that salt out of there as I got some rain this spring. Some of that salt flushed out with the water going out through the tile, and hey, I actually grew some crop.
Okay, so if you've got an alkali or a saline spot, here's what we want you to do. Get some tile in the ground, because the problem over the years in those spots, and the reason why you have them, is poor drainage. And even if you're in a drier area of the country, I don't care. Even if you get 12, 15 inches of rain, the problem is you still have water ponding there and it doesn't move down through your soil properly. Rather than that, it just evaporates from there and it continues to suck salts up to the surface of the soil. So you get some tile out there, and over time, just like Darren said with that one green strip, after 2 or 3 years, that whole area is going to be green now, because as you get some rains over time, that will move the salts through. Remember, salts are very leachable, so we can lower the salt content if we just have good drainage in the soil.
Now, one of the things this farmer noted is that that alkali spot just kept shrinking in area. The sides kept moving in a couple more feet every year, and pretty soon he's going to get something to grow out there, because where it's so white with salt, nothing grows. Not even kochia is growing in there, and kochia in our part of the world is one of those weeds that in areas where nothing grows, kochia just takes over. Well, you couldn't even get that to grow out there. So it's something that really needs to be dealt with. Now, that drainage is important, but it's not a short-term fix. It's not like you're going to put tile in and all of a sudden next year your alkali spot will completely disappear. You still need to do some management practices to deal with that. Now, one thing that some farmers have employed is putting in some cover crop in those areas, or plant a certain crop across the whole field that can handle a higher salt level. Like barley, for example, is one crop that does a pretty good job in fairly salty areas. Obviously, it can't grow in pure salt, but it's going to do a little better job in areas where maybe a soybean can't tolerate it, something like barley can. Other things that farmers have done is just take some barley and maybe take a bale and shred it out there and till it in to get a little bit of organic material out in the soil and try to get something to grow. These alkali spots didn't develop overnight. They aren't going to go away overnight either.
The other thing that a farmer can do is do some deep tillage. We've gone out there with a zone commander. There are farmers that will do anything from deep ripping to just deep chisel plowing, just trying to stir that soil up a little bit and also allow some better drainage in the top few inches. Not clear down deep and lowering the water table like you do with tile, but getting a little better drainage in the top few inches, because maybe there's heavy compaction. In fact, there probably is heavy compaction in that kind of area. One other thing I guess I was going to mention, as salt levels increase, typically soil pH increases. And the other problem, and the reason why those areas get started in the first place, is in very high pH areas, let's say it's 8.5 or maybe even a 9 pH, a lot of nutrients become unavailable to the plant. They get fixed with other elements like calcium, for example. Excess calcium in the soil will bind with phosphorus and many other nutrients. And so all of a sudden, even though it appears that there would be a lot of phosphorus in the soil because of the soil test, well, it's just not getting into the plant. it's tied up.
The big thing is just don't give up on these spots. Don't say, well, you know, I got 100 acres, that's only a 4-acre spot, it's no big deal. It is a big deal, and that area is just going to continue to grow if you don't deal with it. So get after those areas. You know, with some of the management practices we talked about, and there's other things that you can do as well, just keep working on those areas. If you can get something to grow out there, even if you're raising corn and it's 200 bushels the rest of the field and it's 50 bushels in those areas, that's fine.
Well, it gets worse than that. I mean, it gets down to zero, and I guess I can't stress this to you enough. We've worked with so many farmers over the years who've had those spots that they are yielding zero, and within just a few years, they're getting over 200 bushel corn and over 50 bushel soybeans. It absolutely is possible, but you're going to have to address it. You can't just continue to farm around it and just hope that, well, maybe it'll get better sometime. It's not going to happen unless you work on it.
You know, it's really the same story with weeds. If you just let them go and don't try, they're going to get terrible out in your field. So don't let this weed of the week get away from you. It's a tough one. Can you identify it?